Our A. Richard Newton Distinguished Innovators have been inventors, business leaders, venture capitalists, leaders in government and education, and stellar entrepreneurs. Our speaker today, Dean Drako, spans a few of these categories. He's an angel investor. He holds 27 patents. He falls squarely into the stellar serial entrepreneur category. And in fact, Goldman Sachs recently recognized him as one of the most intriguing entrepreneurs in 2014. Who knew that category even existed? So congratulations. Dean's also a Cal grad with a master's in EECS. After graduating from Cal, he went to work at Apple. And interestingly, within 10 years of graduating, he founded and sold companies to Siebel Systems and Cadence Design Systems. Then in 2002, he founded Barracuda Networks, becoming chairman and CEO. And he founded Barracuda using a pattern that he's known for, limiting overhead and complexity. Barracuda introduced an email spam and virus appliance product. Today, Barracuda is a leading provider of security, storage, and networking applications with over 150,000 customers in over 100 countries, and it's traded publicly. In 2003, which you'll notice is just a year after 2002, he founded and is still CEO and president of IC Manage. And so when I said serial entrepreneur, this is a real serial entrepreneur. I'm not sure how you lead two large companies at once. IC Manage is a leader in design and IP management technology. In 2007, for his work, he was recognized by Ernst & Young as Technology Entrepreneur of the Year. And even better, in 2008, he was one of our earliest speakers at the A. Richard Newton Distinguished Innovator Series, so we're happy that he's back. In 2012, he left Barracuda and he founded Eagle Eye Networks, where he's currently CEO. Eagle Eye is the first cloud-based video surveillance company to provide both cloud-based and on-premises recording, making video more available and easier to use. And so it's our pleasure to welcome Dean Drako back for our 10-year CET anniversary. Thank you very much.
Wow, it's good to be back. Have any of you ever seen me speak here at Berkeley before? Okay. One would hope. I spoke last year as well, and on a different speaker series. Okay, how many of you are interested in being entrepreneurs and starting a company? Okay, wow. All right, the bug has bitten. How many of you have an idea and are thinking about trying to do it now or sooner rather than later? Okay, a few. Okay, great. I'm going to basically talk about a handful of things today. Okay, let's see if oh, we're not working on that. Okay, let's see. There we go. I'm going to talk about a handful of things today. I was asked to talk about my entrepreneurial background and the companies that I've started and a little bit of color on them and what's made me successful. So we're going to talk about that first. Then we're going to talk about some principles of entrepreneurship, some kind of rules and guidelines I use when starting and running my companies, how those rules applied to the five of the companies I did, and then a little bit about change and some closing thoughts about how you guys might go and do some of this. So I came to Silicon Valley in 1988, so a long time ago. Graduated from Cal and went to work at Apple Computer. I worked at Apple for 4 or 5 years designing computers. I went to a little company that was 10 people called 3DO. We grew to about 400. We have are known as, I believe, the first company to ever go public without revenue back in the early 90s as a video game company. But I've raised funding from venture capitalists a whole bunch. And then after 3DO, I kind of branched out on my own and started Design Acceleration, Boldfish, IC Manage and Barracuda, and most recently Eagle Eye Networks. In 2003, the first product I founded Barracuda, which was one of my bigger successes. And we started with just one product. And we often talk about, is your idea a feature, a product, or it's a company? Okay, and some things that you come up with aren't really going to be companies. They're going to be a feature and a product for another company. And you got to think about that when you come up with your ideas. But Barracuda, what I did is the first product, it was really the first appliance that was really cloud connected. And so it got updates for spam and virus, and it was pretty revolutionary. One of the things that was very interesting about Barracuda, though, was the underlying business model. We sold these appliances, but the revenue model was really about recurring revenue. 78% of the revenue that Barracuda received was basically subscription fees. So it was about the updates and the subscription. And that made for a very stable business, which was great. And part of the reason that Barracuda was so successful and listed on the New York Stock Exchange. I often get the question of, why did I leave Barracuda and launch Eagle Eye Networks? In 2014, we launched it. I left and kind of started working on it in 2012. I left because basically I saw a huge opportunity, a window of opportunity. There was an entire industry of video surveillance which was growing at around 20% per year, which is a very high growth rate for almost any industry. And no one was really actively pursuing a cloud-based solution. Okay? Everything else had moved to the cloud. Email had moved to the cloud, CRM had moved to the cloud, I'm sure student enrollment and class selection had moved to the cloud. Everything had moved to the cloud, but this one industry was kind of lagging. And so it looked like a beautiful opportunity, and so I jumped on it. And we're now the leader in cloud-based video surveillance. We run New Product Showcase. We got a big investment from Michael Dell. We won Goldman Sachs Entrepreneur in 2014. So a little bit of color on where I come from. There are really 5 principles that I employ when starting a company. And they've worked pretty well for me so far. And so I'm going to kind of go through my guidelines. 1 in 10 companies is typically successful, which basically means, if you can do that complicated math, 9 out of 10 fail. My track record is a little better, knock on wood. But how is that? Okay. Well, I believe that there's 2 things that are really important. Okay, and that's strategy and execution. You have to have an idea which actually people want to pay money for, okay? And you have to execute on the idea relentlessly, okay? If you just keep those 2 things in mind, right, everything else falls into place, okay? So my current company, Eagle Eye Networks, we're doing security cameras that are cloud connected and transmit all the video to the cloud and store it in the cloud. We're not the first ones to try and do this. There's a bunch of folks that have tried to do it before us. Okay, there's even some trying to do it as we speak. Okay, but we're the first ones to basically relentlessly attempt to execute on it with maniacal kind of focus. Okay, and that's kind of makes a difference. At Barracuda, when I came up with the idea for the Barracuda spam and virus firewall in 2003, okay, we were the 140th company to enter the anti-spam market. Okay, I had 140 competitors. Okay, we were certainly not the first. But how were we successful? We were successful by staying focused on a strategy, which was to be the low-cost provider, to be the provider that provided a hardware-based solution rather than a software-based solution. And we relentlessly executed on that model, okay, without wavering. And in the end, we ended up being one of the 2 or 3 left standing when the shakeout kind of came through. So getting back to the 5 things that I think you need to be successful as an entrepreneur, or the Drako entrepreneurial rules, are, number 1, solve a problem. For each one of the companies I've started, the ideas have come from very specific problems that I was personally facing. Okay? That's a very, kind of, I think, profound or insightful thing. Okay? It is very, very hard, I believe, to found a company to go solve a problem when it's not a problem that you have personally experienced, that you internalize, and that you understand deeply. Okay? Uncovering the problems, okay, is basically the challenge. Okay? You have to do stuff to uncover problems. If you look at most of the companies that have kind of come out of entrepreneurs graduating from university or from university students, you'll find that by far the majority of them are consumer types of applications, because those are the applications that the students understand, right? It is a personal problem that they have as a consumer, and they want to solve it. It's a communications problem. It's a Dropbox problem. It's a problem that they face. Okay? It's hard to have good entrepreneurial ideas outside of consumer space if you're not in an industry. Okay? It is very, very unlikely that you're going to be an entrepreneur in, graduating from university and go and solve problems in, the fashion design industry, because you know nothing about how that world works, and you know very little about the problems that they face. You need to get into an industry if you want to try and solve problems. So if you look at the very first company I started, Design Acceleration, I got into the computer industry by going to work for Apple. Okay, I was a chip designer, designing semiconductors, designing the chips that basically made the Macs work. And there were a lot of problems designing those chips. And so, I invented some tools that made designing chips go faster, stronger, et cetera, created a company, and sold those tools to all the folks that wanted them. So you got to solve a problem, okay? And you got to find a problem. The second kind of principle is money. It's a really simple principle. You got to pay attention to the money, okay? There's a lot of hesitation in our society, or in American society, to talk about money, kind of considered a little vulgar. However, I'm very clear with my teams, and I'm very clear with the people I employ and that I bring on, that our mission is to make money. Okay? And you got to basically kind of buy into that if you want to be successful. And why is that? Well, if we don't make money, we will fail, and we will go out of business, and we won't have jobs, and we won't have had the fun of going and creating a great product. And so you do have to kind of pay attention to the money. Okay? Don't be afraid to talk about it and focus on it to a reasonable degree. You also need to conserve the money. Okay? And so when I've done my startups, I have been generally extremely frugal. Now, not everyone in Silicon Valley does that. Okay? I generally spend the money that I raise from other people or that I raise from me as if it was my own money. Okay? It goes a lot further when you do that. And that means that you don't have to raise as much money, and you get less dilution, and you make more money in the end. But those things are all kind of without saying. But you really got to think about the cash. And then the other thing is you're spending investment money, but you also got to focus on how much money can I get from the customer, and how is this business model going to work. The third principle that I have about being an entrepreneur is make your customers happy. Okay? Customer service is really, really crucial. Happy customers tell other potential customers, Okay, the word of mouth is extremely powerful. Someone bad-mouthing you is just as powerful and can hurt you severely. Okay, in any industry, you'd be very surprised at how much people talk to each other about their experiences with suppliers and vendors. In the early days of Barracuda, for example, support was crucial to our success. We gave a tremendous level of support to our customers. You know, they could call us up, and I guaranteed that we would have no phone trees, that someone would answer the phone within 2 or 3 rings, okay, and that they would say, "Thank you for calling, how can I help you?" Okay, and they would actually try and help you. And it didn't matter what you were calling about. The team was instructed to help them for whatever they wanted. You know, we were selling spam and virus firewalls to clean up the email stream. People called us with problems with their routers, problems with their internet connection, problems with whatever. And our guys, who were very smart guys, basically tried to help them, even if it had nothing to do with our products. Okay? That level of customer service endeared those customers to us. They would become extremely loyal. So that when I expanded Barracuda and we went from 1 product to 2 products to 5 products to 15 products, basically those customers, if they needed a web filter or a load balancer and it was on our product data sheet, they would just buy ours. They wouldn't even consider, they didn't ask the price, they didn't ask what the competition was, they didn't do any comparisons with anyone else. They said, "Oh, Barracuda's got one, we're buying theirs." Okay? Because they had such a good experience with the customer service that it became basically their de facto standard. One of the questions I received about prior to this talk was about what is my favorite part of building companies and being an entrepreneur. And this is it. Okay? I get the ultimate satisfaction from basically making customers happy with a great product and with great customer service. People really appreciate it. They're thankful. And that makes me feel good. That's why I do what I do. The 4th principle that I try and apply is basically the scientific method to business. And it's funny, I've never gone to business school. I went to the business school of hard knocks, I guess. Learned it on the street. No one really talks, or at least I've never heard anyone talk about applying the scientific method to your business. But it's what I do. So I do experiments. Okay? I have a hypothesis that we're going to do some radio advertising. We're going to spend X amount of dollars on it. We're going to measure the results of that experiment. We're going to look at the results compared to the amount of money we spent. Did that work or did that not work? Oh, that didn't work. Okay, we're not going to do that anymore. Okay, oh, that did work. We're going to do that more. Okay, same goes for product development. Same goes for marketing strategies. Same goes for sales strategies. Same goes for basically sales organization. All the different functions, you can kind of use this scientific method. Okay, that is extremely contrary to a traditional business plan. Okay, because your traditional business plan says that you're smart enough at the beginning to project out 5 years how much money you're going to spend on radio advertising. Okay, I don't believe that's possible without running experiments and kind of doing it. So I've always run my companies a little bit more fluidic. Yeah. A little more dynamically than kind of this long-term kind of plan. You know, you kind of have an idea of how things are going to shape up, but you really have to adapt. So you measure and adapt quickly, and that's one of the advantages that you have over the larger companies, is you can adapt a lot more quickly. It's one of the advantages of being a small startup, and you need to exploit that because you're usually going up often against bigger players in some way, shape, or form. Okay. One of the things that's interesting is the cloud, okay, in so many ways has enabled you to adapt so much more quickly. whether it's Amazon EC2, whether it's basically the ability to change your software every day, whether it's the ability to do A/B comparisons, whether it's the ability to measure where your advertising hits are coming in. So many ways you can do this so much better than you ever could, and it's pretty powerful. Right, so anyway, the alternative to change is basically disaster. Pretty obvious. The fifth principle, or Drako entrepreneurial principle, is build for success, not an exit. Okay? If you're thinking about your exit, okay, anytime in your first 5 years, you're basically wasting brain cycles in my mind. Okay? You're not exiting in the first 5 years, so don't worry about it. Okay? People will ask you, okay, what's your exit strategy? Okay? My answer to that is I don't plan to exit. I'm here, I am committed. Okay? Nobody asked Henry Ford what his exit strategy was. Okay? He was there to build cars and make a difference. Okay? It's not what you want to focus on. If you make the customers happy, okay, and you build a successful company that has revenue and profits, and you will, opportunities will present themselves. They may be the ability to go public. They may be the ability to be acquired. They may be the ability to, do a number of things. Okay, but you need to focus on basically building the business successfully. Okay, and then opportunities will present them. Okay, so the 5 principles: solve a problem, conserve some cash, watch the money. Okay, make your customers very, very happy. Measure your results, and adapt quickly. Build for success, not an exit. 5 kind of rules that guide most of what I do. Okay, and it's worked pretty well for me, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to go through 5 of the companies that I created that were successful, and talk about how some of the things apply to them. I'm going to do this kind of quick. Someone asked what the inspiration was for each of my companies, so that's kind of why you get this. So Design Acceleration was an EDA company. We made chip design software. Actually, it was the first debugging environment. How many of you are programmers? Okay, you use an IDE, Integrated Debugging Environment. Anyway, Design Acceleration created the first IDE for debugging chips, hardware, back in, 1994, I think it was, 95. I was the founder, and after about 8 years, I sold it to Cadence Design Systems. Okay, it was a bootstrap company, so we took no venture capital funding. So we watched the cash very tightly, and the problem that was being solved was I was a chip designer. There was no IDE. The debugging environment was basically non-existent. I was also a software developer and had been using some great IDEs in ThinkC and anyway, other kind of stuff, the IDEs. And I was like, really, we need this for hardware design, and basically kind of said, oh, okay, well, nobody's doing it. I'm going to go basically create this. So it was a problem I personally had, and it was good. My first customer was Sun Microsystems. So while I was running Design Acceleration, there was this very interesting thing. All of my customers were engineers, okay? And all of the engineers were on flavors of Unix. We didn't have Linux quite back then. Linux was just getting off the ground. But we had Solaris and, HP, UX, and all these different flavors of Unix. But everyone had an email account. And being kind of entrepreneurial and experimental, I created probably one of the very first email newsletters while I was at Design Acceleration. And so we started emailing kind of every month all of our users, our thousands of chip designers. And it was actually, they appreciated it. We gave them hints on how to use the tool and all kinds of stuff. But we had this problem that the database for the email system was different than the database for the CRM system. And so we had 2 email lists, and it was always a mess trying to keep them in sync. And email was taking off. Everybody was getting email. AOL was big, you know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, everybody's going to have this problem. Everybody's going to have this issue of how do I keep, you know, my email lists and things I'm communicating with email and the customer synchronized with my CRM database. And so I created a company called Boldfish that basically solved this problem. And eventually it was sold to Siebel Systems. So again, it was a real problem that I had. Okay, it was funded on the cheap, basically with 5 guys to develop software that I recruited out of the open source world. And it had to adapt quite a bit because the market was changing pretty quick underneath it, right? So another good example. The third one was IC Manage, basically a software company that I founded with a partner. And the issue was chip designs. This is back into the chip design world. We're getting really, really big. Okay, and again, the software guys were using beautiful source code control systems. The hardware guys were using nothing. They were losing track of everything. So basically, we went and built a source code control system for chip design. I'm still the CEO of IC Manage. It's a #1 company in its field. Very few chip designs done in any of your phones or computers are done without the use of IC Manage's software. So all the guys who are making the chips and almost everything use it. Around the same time, I started Barracuda Networks. And this was the spam and virus appliance company. I was getting all the spam in my inbox. I was trying to run email servers. And basically, you know, it's kind of obvious this is a real problem. This is a real problem that everyone's going to have. And so that was all good. And then most recently, after spending 9 years building Barracuda Networks, I started my latest company, Eagle Eye Networks, because I identified another big problem. And that problem was, at Barracuda, I was very focused on customer service. Customer service was really important to me. And so important to me that I opened up centers in each of the countries where we did business: Japan, China, France, UK, Germany, Italy, anyway, all over. And we did support in country. Okay, so one of our policies was that support would always be done by folks in country that actually spoke the native language, and not only spoke the native language, but also knew the native culture. Okay, because there's also a very subtle thing that goes on there. And so in the U.S., I could keep an eye on my support team and my sales team and make sure that they were actually in the office. There was this problem that I always had that somebody needed to be there, in my opinion, at 5 or 6 in the morning to basically take calls for sales. Support was 24/7, so there was always somebody there. But sales, you also have to give great service and support in sales. Okay, this is one of the things that kills me, okay, and I believe kills a lot of companies. If I call somebody up and I want to buy something, and they say, "Oh, John, you know, the rep for your area, you know, he's out today. He's sick. I'll leave him a message. Would you like his voicemail?" I'm like, "Are you serious? Okay, I want to buy something. Okay, you don't have somebody for me to talk to, okay? Because the internet's here. Okay, I'm going to do a Google, and I'm going to be calling somebody else within 10 seconds after I get off the phone with you to see if I can buy it. Okay, get real. Okay, so I was very focused on customer service and sales, and it had to have the same level. The salespeople kind of, in my experience, got a little lazy occasionally. Okay, and I would make them come in at 6 in the morning. They wouldn't get a whole lot of calls at 6 in the morning. Okay, maybe 1, maybe 2. Okay, so then they would start to show up at 6:30, start to show up at 7, start to show up at 7:30, start to show up at 8. Okay, start to show up at 8:30 until basically I would call in at 6 in the morning, pretending to be a customer. Okay, there wouldn't be anybody there. Okay, I'd come into the office, scream up and down. It would become a legendary kind of thing. I did that 2 or 3 times, and then they would learn that they needed to be there. And that worked great in the US. I couldn't do that in Japan or in France. I didn't speak French. Okay, so I'm like, okay, well, how can I solve this problem? Yeah, I wouldn't be able to fake being a customer in French. So how can I solve this problem? So I said, well, I'll just put a camera there, okay, and kind of see when they show up in the office and see when they leave, so that I know that we're covering. So I tried to put cameras in these systems, and basically I couldn't find a system that would work. We have this cloud world. We're using Salesforce.com, where everything's in the cloud, email's in the cloud, file servers are in the cloud, we're putting the phones in the cloud, everything's in the cloud. I could not find a cloud camera system that would even come close to solving this problem for me. And I just wanted to just basically find out when the office was opening and closing. So I kind of realized that this was a big opportunity, and basically chose to go, let my Barracuda baby go, and basically start and pursue this new opportunity. So again, solving a real problem that I had personally encountered. So you may have kind of heard heard the hints that I'm a little bit of a serial entrepreneur, but actually I kind of coined a new term that I'm more like a parallel entrepreneur. So I was running IC Manage and Barracuda, for 8 years simultaneously, and I managed to pull that off. I don't know exactly how, but so I'm actually starting to do a little bit more of that, and so I've been doing incubation of a handful of companies, and I'm trying to put a little formula behind that. I don't know if that's going to work or not. I'm using my experimental method to see if I can make it work. And so I have a few more ideas that are brewing that I have teams working on. And so that's kind of fun. Okay. The last thing I'm going to talk about is kind of change. Okay, and this is kind of, it's kind of obvious. Okay, change creates opportunity. Okay, if you look at every one of the companies I created, there was some change in the industry, some change in society, some change in something that basically made that opportunity possible. So I was asked to talk a little bit about how change, impacts things. Okay, so basically design acceleration was a change in how we do semiconductors, email as marketing, spam kind of showing up on the scene, semiconductor designs getting too big, basically applying the cloud to video surveillance. Okay, so the cloud change. So one of the big changes that is going on right now, and has created just crazy amounts of opportunities, and I think it's going to continue to even create more opportunities. I don't think we've seen the end of it yet. Is basically cloud. Okay, and it used to be called SaaS, and it used to be this and that, but it's been going on for a long time. And actually, this picture, which I borrowed from somebody, I don't remember where, I thought was actually really insightful, okay, because it kind of packaged it up into a very large wave, right? So we started out with mainframes, okay, we went to PCs and servers, okay, and we're now moving everything to the cloud, okay? The PC is dying a miserable death, okay? And it's still important. We still need it because it's kind of the access to the cloud, so it's not like it's going away, okay? But this change of getting all the data basically out of your hands and into somebody else's hands who is far more responsible about making sure it doesn't get messed up, okay, makes a lot of sense. It's standard economy of scale. What gets really strange, and so, basically email CRM, taxes are even in the cloud, stock trading's in the cloud, travel's in the cloud, everything, right? How many of you have ever seen the NAST framework for cloud? Okay, one. All right, this was actually, I thought, very insightful. And the cloud gets very confusing to me, okay, because basically you got things like Amazon EC2 and AWS, which people say are the cloud, but how is that different? Salesforce.com's in the cloud, Dropbox is in the cloud. I don't understand. What is the cloud? It's all these different things. And basically, there's 5 characteristics of the cloud. It's on demand, it's broad networks, resource sharing, you're sharing resources with your friends and other people. Elasticity, you can use a lot or a little bit, and it adapts, okay? And you pay for how much you use, okay? Very simple kind of characteristics. But this is the part that really kind of made it clear for me, and that was there's SaaS, okay, which is basically a full application in the cloud, okay? So CRM system, email system, Dropbox, okay, whatever. And then there's PaaS, okay, which is basically a platform as a service. So this is kind of sold to programmers, right? So it's a little bit, there's a Google app thing. There's like the Ruby on Rails service, Heroku, all kinds of different services that are basically catering to programmers. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about API revolution, and the API revolution kind of fits in here. But they're basically taking a bunch of computers, and they're not doing the app, but they're doing all the stuff underneath to make your app run really well. Okay, and so they enable you to get to market faster with your cloud-based app. And then there's the infrastructure for as a service, and that's basically the Amazon EC2. You can just buy blank computers in the sky, okay, and use them for doing whatever you want to do. Okay, and that basically, the market for that is basically the network guys, effectively. Okay, and then obviously you can have public and private clouds, but those are kind of thing. And so you got basically 3 cloud revolutions kind of going on simultaneously, which is where all the confusion comes from. Okay, mobile. Okay, we're not done with the mobile revolution. Okay, we're, I don't know, 30, 40% into the mobile revolution, maybe. Mobile is going to revolutionize a whole bunch more industries. Okay, Uber kind of being one of the most recent. The whole travel, the whole sharing economy kind of thing is all enabled by mobile. I think there's a whole bunch of restaurant stuff that's still going to happen with mobile. A whole bunch of stuff around food and shopping, groceries. It's going to happen. There's more that's going to happen around mobile. So, electrification of the auto. Okay, we heard rumors last week that Apple's getting into the automobile business. Okay, but again, another area that's just full of change and ripe for opportunities for folks that want to dig into it. The one area that I'm fascinated by, and I think is having far more impact than people realize, is the API economy. Huge change going on here in how software is developed across the globe. Okay, so how many of you kind of heard about kind of open public API kind of stuff? Yeah, okay, it's kind of hard to miss if you're in the EECS world. But 75% of the Fortune 1000 are basically going to offer some kind of public web API by the end of last year. Okay, it's big. It allows great stuff to be done very quickly. It's basically kind of the principles of capitalism and specialization applied to programming. It's like amazing. It's really, really cool, and it allows everything to kind of dynamically change. This, we're using this at Eagle Eye right now, right? So Eagle Eye offers an API for recording video in the cloud, analyzing that video, displaying that video, etc. But all kinds of people want to do experimentation and software development using video. They want to do analytics of the video. They want to monitor customers with the video. They want to count people. They want to detect this or whatever using video. Well, the problem is that's really hard to set up, right? Because basically I got to set up some video recorders. I got to set up some cameras. I got to figure out how to get all the video into the cloud. I got to get it all into the right format. All the cameras output different formats. I got all the formats changed. We've basically provided, basically video in the sky as a service so that we do all the plumbing and piping and make it a lot easier. And we have all kinds of developers kind of jumping on that. Another place of change is video surveillance relative to Eagle Eye. Is people want to, traditionally video surveillance has been used only for security. Okay, there's a whole revolution going. People want to use it for a lot more now. They want to use it for figuring out whether people are getting good customer service or not, figure out whether their office is open on time or not. They want to figure out, how to optimize processes. So over 68% of folks expect that that are basically planning to use video surveillance more than just security. Okay. And I can't leave out the area of change of basically security, given my Barracuda background. Okay, so we're basically kind of losing the battle for internet security right now. Okay, the guys who are basically hacking in are basically winning right now. The number of breaches in 2014 was higher than in 2013, and it doesn't look like we're winning. The attacks are changing. The equipment needed to defend against them is changing. It is a constantly changing kind of, guerrilla warfare kind of battle. So those are some areas of change, okay? And those changes all create opportunities, okay? And I can list off probably 100 more. We live in one of the most amazing times in, I believe, the history of the world, okay? There is more change going on in tech and electronics and software than there might ever be again, okay? I don't know, but it is hard for me to imagine a time when there could be more change than what's going on right now in what we're doing. And so the opportunity is there. Seize it. Okay, so career kickoff thoughts. How many of you are graduating soon? Okay, whoa, a whole bunch. Wow, most. Okay, good luck. So some of the questions that I was given were kind of related to how do you engage with industry, how do you get started, what do you, how do you kick off a career? And so I had some thoughts on that. One of the questions is, do you go work for a large company or do you go work for a startup? Okay, they both have advantages and disadvantages. One of the things, if you go work for the large company, right, you have the opportunity to basically get a source of ideas and get some industry knowledge. So you can go into the banking industry or the manufacturing of, widgets industry, and you're going to learn about the problems of design. God, we can't get this design done because the tools are no good, or, oh my gosh, when we try and deliver this, it doesn't work, etc. And you'll be able to basically develop ideas for potential companies or products that you can go and pursue. If you go into the startup world, okay, you're probably not going to get exposed to that nearly as much, okay, because you're going to be very focused on delivering what you need to deliver for that startup to be successful. And so you're not going to have the luxury to kind of see problems that are peripheral to it that might offer opportunities. Okay, so when I was at Apple, right, I was designing chips, okay, I didn't really have a view into what the problems were in the personal computer industry. But I had a very good view into the problems that were basically a chip designer faced. And so I could go and develop a product that I could sell to those chip designers. In the startup, you're not going to have time or a whole lot of exposure to those peripheral problems. You're going to get exposure only to the problem that the company is going after. They're both good, but they're very different. One of the things that I've learned, and I'm still not very good at, is communication skills. Okay? If you want to be an entrepreneur, okay, I highly encourage you to develop your communication skills, both written, okay, and speaking. Okay? Go join Toastmasters. Okay? Make sure you can write clearly and succinctly. Okay, because it will seriously, seriously help you. As an entrepreneur, if you're going to lead the company, you end up being the first sales guy. You end up being the first support guy. You end up being the person who's trying to raise money. You end up being the person who is basically taking care of everything at some point. And communication is really, really key. Okay? And so if you want to be an entrepreneur and lead the charge, your communication skills are going to need to be strong in every way you can make them. Okay? One of the things I did, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to understand Well, you don't have to. Sometimes you can hire people. But generally, you need to have a really good understanding of all the functions of a company. Okay? So you need to understand what is marketing and why do we do it and how does it work. And you got to have some respect for it. Engineering, manufacturing, sales, a little bit of HR, and the finance side. You need to know and understand what goes on in each of those. When I was growing up, I didn't grow up in a family that had any entrepreneurs or anyone who was running their own business. So I had no idea what any of those functions were. When you go into a company, if you go into a startup company, okay, that is 10 to 100 people, you'll get some exposure to each one of those areas, and you can learn a lot about them. If you go into a large company, you won't get exposure to any of those things. You'll get exposure just to the area that you're specializing in. For most of you guys, engineering. Okay, so you'll understand the engineering side very well. One of the things I did when I was at Apple, actually one of the questions I got was about connections. How do you make connections in industry? My advice was, if you want connections, go to LinkedIn and click connection. Okay. Connections aren't particularly useful, in my opinion. Okay. Well, that's kind of funny. In the United States, doing business, connections are not as beneficial as they are in some other countries. In some other countries, you really got to kind of know people, and that's how they do business. In the United States, it's more about what you deliver and what you pay for, and the best deal and the best service. So what you need is not connections in sticking out of your career, is you need relationships. Okay? And so you got to think about what kind of relationships are going to help me get my business moving. Okay? And those relationships are not established through what I'll call light engagement. They're established with a little bit of, I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back. I'll help you this way, you help me this way. And so you've got to kind of find places where you can help other people, and they'll in turn help you, and they can be helpful to you. That kind of relationship can be very powerful and very helpful, especially as an entrepreneur or as someone trying to kick off a business. One of the things I did at Apple in order to get this bigger understanding of the organization is I actually kind of made friends with some of the people in other departments. You encounter them, you're in meetings with them, but you don't really know what they do, okay? And I actually shadowed some of them for a couple days. So basically, I found somebody in marketing, and basically I kind of didn't do my job for 2 days and followed them around and just kind of saw what they did. And so I got this very good understanding of what a marketing person did. I did a similar thing in manufacturing and sales. And that worked really well inside the large company. And most large companies will let you do that as long as you're getting your job done. So those are some of the pieces of advice I have as you kind of kick off onto your career. There are a lot of opportunities out there. So how do you get success? It's strategy and execution, mostly execution. I often say, people ask me, Dean, how were you successful? Okay, and my answer is almost always the same. It's 1/3 really hard work. It's 1/3 being smart and picking what you do, and it's 1/3 getting lucky. Okay, and basically you get success when you get all of those thirds kind of making a whole to do it. So anyway, I think you guys know that. Any questions that anyone wants to throw at me?
First, thank you very, very much. We just want to make sure that we can hear the questions on the video.
Excellent.
Hey, do you mind explaining what you mean by API economy?
So the API economy is, my favorite example of this is a company called Twilio. How many know Twilio? Right? So Twilio was one of the first companies to actually kind of basically say our business is only going to be APIs. And so they said, we're going to set up a website, and if you hit this URL with a phone number and you have an account set up with us, for 10 cents, you can send a text message to anybody on any cell phone. Okay? That was actually a little bit hard to do because you got all these different carriers, different interface requirements, different rules, how do you pay for it, et cetera. And so Twilio basically went and negotiated with all the carriers, did this interface, and then basically said, anybody who wants to do this, pay us 1 cent or 10 cents per SMS message. Well, holy cow, everybody jumped on the bandwagon. Okay, all of a sudden, the banks could use it to do your account verification. Okay, so now they could say, oh, and it took them no more than 2 weeks to integrate it into the banking application. All of a sudden, the airlines could send you SMS messages about your flight delays or confirmations. And so, boom, the guys who were running the airlines could interface and do this. They would never have done it themselves because it was too hard of a problem. It would have taken 25 guys and 2 years to do all the development. But Twilio came along and basically provided an API and made that possible. And so you've got a whole bunch of folks providing APIs to do similar kinds of things. Facebook has an API, LinkedIn has an API, and you can start to build on top of what they've created. And it's, pay for what you use kind of API. Does that help? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you for answering all those questions, also from the pre-questions.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right, going back to your principles, I just want a clarification on a couple of them. One is on, I'll ask both questions first, so you can answer together. The first one is on your experimentation. How many experiments can you afford to run at the same time? Like, at some point, is it like too much? And then the second question is, when you were talking about having a strategy, like with Barracuda, you were talking about a low-cost hardware-based strategy. How much of the strategy did you actually communicate? Like, when you're in the market, you may have come in with a thought, well, we're going to be the low-cost provider. But when you sell it, do you come in saying, we are the low-cost provider, or do you come in just saying, we provide email, anti-spam, and it just happened, you subtly let them figure out that that's your advantage?
Yeah. So, excellent questions. So, the first one is, how many experiments can you run? Yeah. And the reality is you can't run a whole lot. Okay, you're going to run 1 or 2 in each department in a modest-sized organization. Even in a larger organization, it's hard to run a lot of them. If they're kind of outside and not impacting the internal organization a whole lot, you can run a few more. But it's hard to get the mental capacity to really stay on top of measuring the results. Okay, so for example, advertising is one where we did a lot of experimenting at Barracuda. Okay, so Google AdWords, what's your return? You can run millions of experiments in Google AdWords trying to optimize it, but you can kind of only focus on 1 or 2 at a time. Facebook advertising, radio advertising, different kinds of things. With the sales force, we could only run one kind of thing that we would be trying at any one time, because the sales team, communicating it to them, getting them to understand it, getting them to articulate it out was, there was a lot of momentum, and people can only mostly deal with one thing at a time. So you can't be running lots of experiments successfully. The second question around
how much communicate?
How do you communicate your strategy, and how much of that do you communicate to your customers? In the case of Barracuda, we didn't really communicate our low-cost strategy in any significant way. The price was low. It was kind of obvious. We put the price on the advertising, but we didn't say, hey, we're the low-cost provider. We just said, and people said, oh, well, that's a better price. And the hardware, you still see the hardware boxes in all of the airport advertising. And so that was very clearly articulated. But not, we never used the word hardware. We used the picture. So a lot of the strategy becomes very obvious, okay? And it needs to be obvious because it's part of your differentiation. So, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in words.
But it sounds like there's some art between what you think is your strategic positioning and how to pull out what you actually say.
There is a little bit of an art, right? Because, you figure that out through experimentation. Okay. All right? You do not sit, your messaging, you don't sit in a vacuum, come up with your messaging, okay, and then basically just go with it, okay? You basically say, okay, hey, I think this message works. You bounce it off your uncle and your aunt and your mother and your cousin and your, whatnot, and you kind of gauge reactions. And then you go a little bit bigger, and, you kind of say, okay, this messaging seems to be working. Okay, people get it. You go out to a broader audience, customers, et cetera. And, you're tuning it, right? And it's based on, are you clearly articulating, your value prop and engaging them to what you have? So that's kind of the methodology.
Yes.
So you've had 5 successful ventures. Have you ever had any unsuccessful ones?
That's a good question. I knock on wood, I've been lucky that I haven't had any that were categorized as unsuccessful yet. 3DO was kind of an interesting one. It wasn't mine, but I was kind of, it was my first real small company startup thing. And in the end, it didn't work. And I learned a lot of lessons being involved in that startup. One of which was control. And I didn't really mention that in the presentation. But 3DOs failed because there were too many cooks in the kitchen. We tried to do a consortium of a bunch of people to make a video game system. And basically spent too much time bickering and negotiating between the people involved and not enough time executing. And so there was a very hard lesson kind of learned there. It wasn't, I didn't create it and it wasn't my idea. I was just in the trenches trying executing it.
Just a follow-up question. Speaking of working with a small group of people, you said that one of your 5 companies, you basically just recruited 5 developers and then you went ahead and did it. When you're starting up something small, how do you know who's the right fit for you? How do you know who you should be working with?
Aha! Well, you don't. Okay? It's kind of like the interviewing process. How many of you, you guys have all been on the receiving end of interviews, right? Where you're interviewing for jobs, but not on the executing interviews. It's very, very hard to measure a person until you work with them. Okay? So it's kind of like, it's amazing, you're in your class, right? And, you're doing the same problem sets next to 25, 50, or 100 other students. And you kind of know who the sharp ones are. Okay? They're asking the hard questions in class. They're kind of engaged. And you kind of know who the slackers are. Okay? But that's because you're kind of working together with them. You get in some groups, and, you kind of, you know who the A students are and who the B students are and who the C students are. Well, work's kind of the same. It's really not any different. Once you get in the company, like 3 or 4 weeks in, you know who is going to deliver and who's not going to deliver, okay? And you can tell the quality of the people. You can't tell that until you actually start to work with them, okay? You can interview for, months. You can't tell, in my opinion. Maybe there's some people who claim they can tell in an interview, but my belief is that you can't tell. So you got to try, right? Back to my experimental method. Okay, you give it a go, and what you got to be willing to do though is after 3 or 4 weeks pull the ripcord if it's not right. okay? And, you know, if you do that, there's no harm, no foul. But that's my real belief in how you have to tackle that problem. So maybe not what you wanted to hear, but a dose of the reality.
I think I thank you very much, and I think graciously you've agreed to stay for a few minutes if people want to come up and ask you questions. But about 10 minutes
Yeah.
worth. So if you all still have questions, feel free to come on up.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I wish you guys all great luck.